In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Ascent TV is proud to present MYT Muslim Youth Talk.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, and welcome to another episode of Muslim Youth Talk. I'm your host Muhammad Saadi. With us again is Sheikh Hanif Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Alright, brothers and sisters, last time we discussed the importance of doing da'wah. We ended by talking about who to do da'wah to, leading on to non-Muslims. Inshallah, today we'll be focusing more on this topic about dealing with non-Muslims, how to do da'wah or propagate the message to them, and especially relating to us at school, whether you're in elementary, junior high, high school, or even college. So, inshallah, today we're going to start off by talking about, okay, we know that we're in high school, or college, or elementary school, and we see so many different kinds of students. We see atheists, we see people of different races and ethnic backgrounds, different religions, Hindus, Christians, Jews. Do we talk to them all the same way? Okay, this is the truth, therefore let me say it one way and the same way to everybody. Is that how we should go about doing it?
You know, the funny thing is that we're not prophets. So the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given to the prophets, we can't tap into that. We could tap into our Quran and see what it is. But you want to deal with different people on an individual basis. You don't want to approach the atheist the same way that you approach the Christian. You don't want to approach the Christian the same way that you approach the Jew. In giving dawah, you do want to have general knowledge of the people that you deal with. You know, it's like your house and your neighbors around you. When I was growing up, we knew who our neighbors were. We knew what kind of job they had. We knew what kind of church they went to. And when you go to school, you need to know who your students are, who the people are around you. And if you live your life right, if you're doing things a little different, then this opens the door for them to ask you about why you do what it is you do. Take for instance, at school, they're serving pizza. They have pepperoni pizza. You're sitting at the table with your bag lunch. First thing is, especially if you're in the lower levels of school, what, you don't like pizza? I can't eat that pizza. It has pork on it. You don't eat pork? Why not? This opens the door. And for all of our parents that are watching this show, you have to explain to your children why we don't eat certain things, why we don't do certain things, so that when your child is asked those questions, they can respond. Well, you know, God said for us not to eat certain things because they're not good for us. What do you mean that's not good for you? Well, my grandfather, he was a Christian. Or if you were Muslim your whole life, one of the things that your child can say is, you know what, on television, when they tell you that people have high blood pressure and things like that, the first thing the doctor tells you to do if you eat pork is not to eat pork. So we don't eat it anyway. Oh, that's right. Because people watch TV. There's a connection there. So use what you have to give dawah. Dawah situations open up for you all day, every day.
All right, so Sheikh, let's kind of break it down based on age. I know we said that, okay, da'wah is for everybody. So if someone's in, you know, elementary school or junior high school, they should be able to also propagate the message or whatever information they have as well. Yes, they're not necessarily matured, you know, intellectually 100% yet. You know, they're still learning, they're still gaining knowledge and gaining experience in this world. But how would someone at that stage, you know, do da'wah differently than someone in college?
Obviously, our mental capacities when we're in elementary is nowhere near the mental capacities when we reach junior high and high school. But what's very important is that the parents begin to teach their children and take their children to the center so that they'll begin to understand what Islam is from that point in time. Now, in elementary, you're not going to get those same type of questions that you would in high school and middle school. So what you need to do is, number one, bring your kids to the centers. Teach them. Because at that age, kids, they only know God and they only know the prophets of God. And me growing up in this country and growing up as a Christian and growing up around Jews and things like that, for the most part, all children know about Prophet Adam, Prophet Noah, Prophet Abraham, Prophet Moses, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon them all, teach your children their stories. And they can relate to these people about their stories. And the little kids, they can go home and they'll tell their parents, you know, this guy, he's in my class, he's a Muslim, and he tells us about Jesus. He tells us about Moses. He tells us about Noah. Everybody can remember these stories. You just have to tell them and teach it to them on an Islamic way, and you won't have any problems with them. As far as elementary is concerned, that's taken care of. But in junior high and in high school, people begin to develop their own ideologies. Their parents may be Christian, their parents may be Jews, their parents may even be Muslims, but they may come into their own thought patterns and say, you know what? I don't think that Christianity is right. I want to be an atheist. So now, as a Muslim, in this other age group, as he advances in age, his knowledge should also advance with his age. This is when we begin to teach our children the roots of the religion for their own understanding. They have to understand Tawheed. If you can teach your child Tawheed, I don't care what ideology somebody else is from. If they know Tawheed, they will never be swayed. Because Tawheed is the basis of Allah being just. Tawheed is the basis of why we have a prophet, because prophets came to do what? To teach us about Allah and to teach us that Allah is what? He's one. Tawheed. Our Imams come to second the information that was given by the prophets. And the prophets taught us to do what? Believe in the oneness of Allah. And Qiyamah, or the day of resurrection, what does that come to do? It really comes to assure that God is just. That those things that were done wrong to us in the past, and those things that we did good and we were never rewarded for it, we all get them. Why? Because God is just. And because God is just, it teaches us again about Tawheed. So if you understand Tawheed on any level, on every level, you have no problems.
All right, so Sheikh, then let's break it down by religion now, or lack of that. We'll start off by atheists. I mean, there's a lot of kids who maybe their parents are atheists and raised them atheists, or many kids who question the idea of God. So how do we speak to them? We said that we have to speak to them in a different way than we speak to Christians or Jews or any other religion. So how do we go about speaking to people who don't even believe in God?
Well, the problem that you have with an atheist is that atheism is a form of belief. What is the belief? I don't believe that there is a God. So if you're doing a science project and we were going through the scientific method, in order to prove something that does not exist, you have to first understand and accept the fact that it does exist, or there's a possibility that it exists. But when you take a child that's very young, children always ask their mother and their father, where do we come from? As parents, where do we come from? What do you mean, where do we come from? You're thinking it's something else. But where does the world come from? Did the world just happen? Or did someone make it? If their parents say, well, you know, everything just happened, then with a child, and you can tell your child, listen, if someone tells you that the world just happened, why don't you go get them some marbles and tell them to take the marbles and throw the marbles against the wall and watch how the marbles fall on the ground. And then you say, okay, pick up the marbles again and throw them against the wall again, and let's see if we can make them land the same way. 5, 6, 7-year-old kid can do this. What does that child understand? That the way you did it the first time, you'll never be able to get it to do it again. Never. It's an impossibility. So to think that we just happen to come into this world haphazardly, that the sun is where it's at, that if we were just a little further away from the sun, we would freeze to death. If we were a little closer to the sun, we would burn to death. As we grow in our knowledge, the situation becomes different with the atheist. And if you could start off from those simple things to show that there's nothing in existence that started from nothing. How did it become into existence? There has to be a primary cause. And that primary cause cannot be dependent on anything. And because it's not dependent on anything, it's not a part of us. So, and that's when you graduate higher, higher, higher. But if they can understand that, you have no problems. This is the way that I approach atheists.
All right, so Sheikh, now we've got a general idea of how to approach atheists. Obviously, there's more arguments about how to prove God and, discussing these things with them. But I think that it's important that we just understand how to talk to them at different levels, especially since you mentioned for those who are younger and elementary, to use examples that can relate to kids, like where we come from. Every kid's probably asked that question. And then marbles. Something very easy to do. Can you actually, someone could go home and do it right now, and they'll understand the concept. And actually, with college students, you can talk about using our intellect more and use rational arguments. So how about these Eastern religions, though? Okay, let's say, we know how to talk to atheists, those who don't believe in God. We may not know how to talk to maybe Christians and Jews, because we can relate almost, because we all should share the idea of the monotheistic God. But what about these other Eastern religions? How do we go about talking to them? How can we relate to them? We have Hindus, we have Buddhists, we have people of these kind of faiths. So how do we go about propagating to them?
Okay, in the Eastern religions, you have a theistic religion and you have a non-theistic religion. Let's take the two most popular of the Eastern religions, one theistic and one non-theistic. The Hindus are theistic. What do we know about Hindus, or what is it that we say about Hindus? We say the Hindus believe in many gods. They say that a monkey could be God, a rat could be God, anything could be God. Not that, they say that these things manifest itself, God manifests himself in these things. So they don't have a problem with dealing with these things, right? But from the Islamic point of view, we should go back and we should remember the stories that we hear when we're kids. Who was the first family, complete family, to accept Islam? It were the Yassirs. Ammar came home, he knocked over the idol of his parents, and his parents, Sumayya and Yasser, after he gives them the story about what the Prophet talked about, they became Muslim. So, when a person uses an idol as a form of worship, even my little daughter that's 4 years old can show the same thing that Abraham did, and that was, why do you want to worship something that can't even protect itself? If my 4-year-old daughter can destroy this thing, you don't want to be facetious about telling them that, but this thing can't do you anything. It can't help you. It can't harm you. So why do you worship it? This is on the elementary level. But when you get to junior high and high school and even college, you begin to understand the concept of God in Hinduism. What is that concept of God? A Hindu is not a polytheist. He becomes an idolater because he prays to idols. But in theology, he's a pantheist. Pantheism means that you don't believe that there's more than one God. You believe that one God manifests himself in many different things. So they said everything is God. Well, we as Muslims say everything is God's. Everything belongs to him. When we begin to look at this thing and we really do the research with them, you say to those people, listen, I don't know much about Hinduism, but from my understanding, don't your gurus, don't those who have higher knowledge say to you from your holy books, from the Gita? And for me, I know these books. For the average person, they don't know these books. But what is the main concept of God in their religion? As far as the learned men know, they say God is one. He has no partners. He is by himself. He created the world. How many gods are there? There are one. Does he manifest himself in anything? No. Because according to their scripture, they say that eyes cannot see him, though he see all eyes. Which means that the same thing we have in Islam. Vision comprehends him not, though he comprehends all things. Again, this breaks back down to Tawheed. So I don't care what religion it is. You take a Buddhist. The Buddha says, you know what? We're here. Life is all about pain and suffering. Once we stop the pain and suffering by doing what? You detach yourself from everything so that you can elevate your level, so that you don't have to deal with life anymore. And if you fail, you're reincarnated. So how does the Buddhist explain to his child at 4 and 5 years old, hey, you know, if you die today, don't worry about it. You're coming right back tomorrow. What kind of concept is that? They don't get into that concept until they're older and able to understand that. So our children on the elementary level, they don't have to deal with that. But you ask them the question, you don't believe in God? No. Who do you follow? I follow the Buddha. What about the Buddha do you follow? I follow his teachings. How was Buddha made? At elementary, their kids aren't going to answer that. They're going to go to their parents. And they're going to come back and you say, you know, the God I worship, he made everything. Even at the elementary level. As you grow higher and higher and higher in your studies and in your intelligence, then you can have bigger and better conversations. Okay, you believe in reincarnation. This is both the Hindus and the Hindus and the Buddhists. Who controls what you come back as in your reincarnation? What stops the cycle of reincarnation? If there's nothing that's controlling that, then how do you get out of this cycle? The Hindus say you become one with God. How is that possible from the definition that your knowledgeable man has given us about God? No one can see God. And with the Buddhists, then the question becomes, there's no nirvana for them. So what stops your cycle of birth and rebirth? That's a life of misery. So this is how we approach both of these Eastern religions.
You know, Sheikh, that's actually interesting because many of us don't know these things about Buddhists or Hindus or other Eastern faiths. So I think that's very beneficial. Inshallah, we'll continue the discussion on this with Christians and Jews and how to deal with them after this quick commercial break.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, therefore, as for the orphan, do not oppress him. With orphans in Afghanistan, Lebanon, Pakistan, and over 3 million in Iraq, their numbers are growing by the many. Deprived of food, clothing, sufficient health care, and a good education, you can make a difference. For only $25 a month, you will provide food, shelter, health care, and education. The Prophet ﷺ said, I and the sponsor of an orphan are as one in heaven. Sponsor a child today at myorphans.org. For more information, contact us at 313-945-5681.
Welcome back, brothers and sisters. We were talking about how to deal with Hindus and Buddhists and how to go about talking to them. We mentioned that because they both share the idea of reincarnation, you can ask these very fundamental questions like, the cycle stopping at some point. And now let's talk more about Christians and Jews and how to talk to them. We don't necessarily want to get into the arguments of how to prove, them to be false, but how to go about talking to them. How do we relate to them? How do we go about, finding the best approach to convincing them of the truth? So how do we go about doing that?
One of the things about dialogues, the thing that makes dialogues easiest is when you have a lot in common. We could sit back and we could talk about the commonalities between Jews, Christians, and Muslims until the cows come home. So in our approach with the Jews and the Christians, what are the things that we really want to talk about? Number one, we want to talk about how God is just. Number two, we want to talk about how the prophets are viewed. Number three, when things really get cooking with us, then we'll break down concepts like original sin, concepts like salvation. And this comes later on. But for your children, one of the things that we always tell our children is that, the God of Abraham, the God of Moses, and in the Quran, there's actually verses that say, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of the tribes, the God of Musa, the God of Isa, and the God of Muhammad. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. It brings us all together. So when we approach the Jews and the Christians, our job is very easy because we have so many things in common. So let's not think about all the negative things, but when they do approach, we need to handle them in the best ways, tactfully. And once you get older, every Muslim out there should have a copy of a Bible. Not any Bible, but get a study Bible. I prefer the Schofield Study Bible because it gives the commentary from there. And if you're going to be serious about giving dawah to Jews, get a Chumash, which is a translation of the Torah with the commentary, so that you're able to do these things. But you don't need all of that because we know about Jesus from the Quran. If no Christian ever talks to us about Jesus, we could tell the Christian about Jesus. If no Christian ever tells us about Abraham, we could talk about Abraham. So let's just stick with the things that are common between us.
All right, thank you, Sheikh. There's again a lot of information that we can get into about the different concepts, like you mentioned, original sin and salvation, and inshallah we could probably save that for another time. We actually did run out of time. Hopefully next time we can actually talk more about how to deal with other Muslims. Now we've actually narrowed it down to other sects that actually have more in common than even Christians and Jews. And so hopefully we can talk about that next time. Thank you for being on the show. Brothers and sisters, if you have any questions or comments or any concerns, please do email us at the address on your screen. I'm your host, Muhammad Sa'adi. Inshallah, we'll see you next time. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Copy, duplication, distribution, and broadcast of this program is strictly prohibited by law without the express written consent of Ascent TV. All rights are reserved to Ascent TV. For more programs like this, visit us online at www.ascenttv.net. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.